In the quiet, mist-covered town of Oakenfield, there existed a name that was whispered in both awe and fear: Elias Grayson. Known as a master craftsman, Elias's dolls were considered masterpieces, with glassy eyes that seemed to follow you no matter where you stood, and delicate porcelain features that made them appear almost human. It was said that his creations could breathe life into any room they graced. People from all over the region sought his dolls, unaware that his artistry held a chilling price. No one knew where Elias got his materials, but rumors swirled like the fog that crept over the town at night. It was said that his workshop, nestled deep in the woods, was filled with strange and unmarked crates, filled with things that no one had ever dared to inquire about. His store was closed to the public after dusk, and the rare few who had visited claimed the air inside reeked of something far worse than dust, something metallic, almost alive. Lena Doyle, a curious young journalist, had heard these whispers and, intrigued by the mystery, arrived in Oakenfield to investigate. She had been drawn to the case of the missing children. So many had disappeared without a trace in the last decade, and it was as if the town had simply forgotten them. Every year, on the anniversary of their disappearances, flowers were laid at the foot of the statues in the town square, and the townsfolk would carry on as if nothing was. Lena, however, wasn't satisfied with the comforting narratives people tried to sell. She wanted answers. One evening, after hours of fruitless interviews, she found herself standing outside Elias Grayson's workshop, the lights dim inside, casting faint shadows on the walls. Something about the place felt different in the silence of the night. A darkness, an unnatural stillness, as though it had been waiting for her arrival. She couldn't resist. The door was unlocked, creaking as she stepped inside. At first, there was only the scent of dust and the dull thud of her footsteps. But as her eyes adjusted, she saw them, lined up against the walls, positioned in carefully crafted tableaus, as if waiting for the next show to begin. The dolls. But these weren't ordinary dolls. Each one had a perfectly sculpted face, delicate and serene, frozen in a lifelike expression. Their bodies were clothed in frilly lace, but beneath the fabric, Lena's gaze fell on something that made her blood run cold. The fingers were too thin, too long. The skin was too smooth, yet too taut. The joints were wrong, almost too human. These weren't simply dolls, they were too real. Lena backed away, her heart hammering in her chest, when her eyes fell on a wooden table at the back of the workshop. There, she saw the outlines of what appeared to be a body covered by a sheet. But it wasn't a doll. Not entirely. A child, motionless, pale and lifeless, was sprawled beneath the thin cloth, a fragile figure with glassy eyes staring into nothing. Lena's breath hitched as she slowly lifted the edge of the sheet. The child's face was disturbingly perfect, too perfect, with fine details that no mere artist could replicate. But there was something wrong. The child's skin, so soft, had the uncanny look of porcelain. There was no breath, no heartbeat, just the perfect, still silence of death. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her, plunging the room into darkness. The chilling realization struck her. This was no ordinary workshop. Elias Grayson had been creating more than dolls. He had been creating preservations, the bodies of missing children frozen in time, given life in the most twisted way possible. The line between art and atrocity had long since blurred. The sound of footsteps echoed in the darkness, and Lena spun around to see Elias standing in the doorway, a quiet smile on his face. "I see you've discovered my work," he said softly, his voice smooth and cold. "I've always believed that art should be immortal, don't you? And what better medium than the human form?" Lena stumbled back, her mind racing. You can't do this. These children..." "Shoo!" Elias interrupted, his voice lowering into a dangerous calm. "They wanted to be remembered. I gave them that. They'll never be forgotten. They'll never fade. I'm giving them eternity." The silence in the room deepened, thick and suffocating. Lena's pulse quickened as Elias moved closer, his eyes gleaming with twisted pride. "Every artist must sacrifice something, dear Lena. My art requires a delicate touch. Flesh, bone, memory. It's all part of the process." Lena turned to run, but the door she had entered was no longer there. Instead, the walls seemed to close in on her, the shadows reaching out like hands, grabbing at her. In the flickering candlelight, she saw the dolls move slightly, their glass eyes gleaming with an unsettling awareness. Elias chuckled softly from the shadows. "You'll be perfect. You'll make a fine addition to my collection. I think you'll fit in beautifully." The last thing Lena saw before the darkness consumed her was the figure of a doll, staring back at her with eyes that weren't quite human, but had seen everything. The town of Oakenfield, with its beautiful dolls, never spoke of Lena again. The children who had vanished, they weren't gone. They were simply preserved, immortalized in the silence of Elias Grayson's workshop. And so, the line between life and death, art and atrocity, remained forever blurred. In Oakenfield, the dolls were always watching.